It kind of depends on the honey, though, because some honeys are darker than others, have different ash contents and tons of stuff. So since they're not a homogenized ingredient, but you know, you can at least watch progression outside of having a candy thermometer in there and actually physically watching the temperature. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think it'll stay at certain temperatures until it drives off a certain amount of moisture out of it, and then it kind of moves on to the next stage, if I'm not mistaken.
The way it sort of works from my candy making experience is that the temperature just very gradually as the water is boiled off, the boiling point goes up.
Okay, that's what it is. It's a gradual, not a line.
Yeah, it's not like the first experiment in 9th grade science where you boil water and it doesn't go up after 100 degrees until it's becomes steam. It's because you're changing the solution and you're raising the boiling point by driving off the water.
Fair enough.
Now, are you guys using? All right. So, what's your favorite container for doing this in? Because obviously we're dealing with volume, which means bigger pot. And also, you know, burnability, which, you know, does tend to, I would think, lend itself to using a particular type of pot to keep that from happening as much as possible. Not to mention cleanup, you know.
Yeah, it's just a thick stainless steel pot. I mean, anything that we probably was, I don't think we'd do much more than 15 gallons of volume to really do that. And it's just, you know, it's small batches. Certainly haven't made a really extremely large batch of this stuff. But that's definitely just something that's taller than it is wide, because it will tend to, well, I guess it's volume. It will expand quite a bit and overflow, and people trying that at home, it's like, well, you'll get a very nasty surprise if you fill the thing 3/4 full of honey and try to boil that. That would just be not. You have a lot of bees really invited to your party.
Are we speaking from experience here?
I have had, that's how you can't go through life doing everything right the first time.
You're right.
You make some mistakes along the way.
Yeah,
someone's got to be the bad example.
I know, right? We learned that making beer, and I'd heard everybody say never turn your back on it, and I thought, yeah, we turned our back on it. Bad mistake.
Boil over.
Just for a second, I turned away to the refrigerator, turned back, and it was all over the floor. I was like, oh my god. So
a cool thing I learned when I was boiling sugar for making wine was I would just dump my sugar in the bottom and stir it up a little bit, and so it was thicker sugar in the bottom. And as it boiled, because it was clear, you could actually watch the boiling line moving up as it dissolved more. So you could say, okay, well, it's only halfway up the pot. I can turn away for a bit, but okay, now it's an inch from the top where the bubbles are disappearing again. Okay, now I gotta keep an eye on it.
Get it off the heat. Yeah. So, Mike, you were saying something, or I don't know if it was Mike or Eric was saying, you only do a portion of your honey that way for the batch?
For some, I mean, that's what David was saying, that somebody does that. And I've done that before in the past, trying to make a beer-like mead where we're trying to make a darker color to make it match kind of a beer, but if we were using light-colored honey, how are we going to get kind of a copper color out of it? So only boiling a portion till it was mahogany and adding that 10% back to the primary fermentation of mead, and trying to get some color out of that. So, and it has a little bit of a roasty character to it, and depending on what honey and the characters of the honey, if you don't totally scorch it, it'll still retain and sometimes accentuate the characters that the honey has, for good or for bad. But it will do that sometimes. But it's kind of like you said, that point where you're starting to go caramel, where they all kind of homogenize on their flavor profile. They're going toward char. They all kind of converge on this flavor profile. But before that, you'll start to get sometimes in more intense, like toasting coriander, where the oils come out. It's much more intense with the character. Sometimes it does that with certain honeys. Orange blossom tends to get a little bit more rich in the character before it turns to caramel. I've found before. I've used cotton before, and that one tends to have more of a, not a hay-like character, but rustic is maybe another word, and that kind of gets a little bit more intense before it kind of goes more toward the caramel side. So they kind of converge on a center line once you go past a certain threshold. I haven't taken enough good notes on it to really know, but it's anecdotal. How about that? That I've noticed that, but.
All right. What about the rest of you that have caramelized honey? What honey varietals have you used, and what did you notice?
I've tried Metaphone before, and that one is already kind of a toasted marshmallow, and it just gets really, the cotton candy actually pushes kind of hard in it too. But it's like going to the county fair where you've got toasted marshmallows and cotton candy and kind of the caramel apple kind of character to it. I mean, it doesn't have as much the apple character, but just the caramel. It just kind of reminds me of caramel. At some point when you start putting that, but I was making small little 1-gallon batches, so I wasn't going. That's kind of a unique honey. I'm like, I don't really want to necessarily destroy it on an experiment, but I tried basswood. Basswood is kind of already a lime-like character to it, and I was curious about how the phenolic character was going to change on that, and that actually retained quite a bit of the phenolic character afterwards. Even with it was almost kind of like eucalyptus kind of character to it. If you've ever had or dealt with that, the eucalyptus cough drops.
Not a big fan
it's kind of
eucalyptus honey. The basswood's big for me.
It is. So, but basswood, or I guess with the linden tree or whatever that happens in northern areas in the United States, it has that kind of character. But I think I've only done that, maybe some clover, just to play around with the temperatures and see what happens. And that's a pretty easy baseline one. It's not necessarily really expensive, and it's a fairly blonde color in general, so you can actually watch the color change in it. If you start with a really dark amber, like our orange blossom is fairly dark and quite amber on it, it's not so easy to really see the transition from like that kind of copper color to like a garnet to a mahogany, and it goes pretty fast when you see that color change. But dropping it on the aluminum foil, you can definitely see that color progression, like
or a white plate or something.
Something like that. Something with really high contrast behind it.
Okay.
I just do aluminum foil because it's disposable and whatnot. But but that's just certainly a technique, and trying different flavor profiles. And sometimes if I'm making fruit bochets, I guess you, in candy making, don't you go to a certain threshold and then cool it down, then go up to your storage kind of temperature afterwards if you want it to be solid or a softball, hardball kind of character. I've cooled it down in the past by putting in just individually quick frozen fruit, and that not only chills it down, but breaks down the fruit as well. And then you add your water to it, and that kind of keeps the fruit intensity.
That is a really cool idea.
And you got to watch out for splashing.
Oh, yeah.
Go pretty heavy.
Cool it off a little, you kill yourself.
It'd be like napalm, man. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's two birds in one stone, though. It's like immediately thawing stuff. It doesn't really cook any of the fruit, per se. Even if it does, it's kind of maybe a little nuanced character to the fact that you've made a bochet. So that's kind of it's harder to measure your specific gravity with that, though. With all the fruit in there, you still have to kind of, if you can put it all in and then pour it through one of those nylon mesh bags, so you kind of save the fruit for a second and then take your gravity reading, get a better measure of what you're working with. Keep adding the water till you find the starting gravity you want. You have the floaty bits in there and all the fruit. It makes it a whole lot harder for people to take. They're like, I'm not sure how that's affecting my hydrometer reading.
Unless it's sticking it to the edge, it really shouldn't, because the fruit is subject to the same effects from the specific gravity of the solution. Fair enough. I don't believe that anything that's not dissolved is going, aside from like bubbles that would cause your hydrometer to float. I don't believe that anything that's suspended is going to be causing any problem with your hydrometer, because it's subject to the same things itself. I could be wrong on that, and I'd love to hear Pete talk about it, but...
Sure. Yeah, you have methodology after a while. I'm pretty sure this methodology works, and you just roll with that after a while, even though sometimes it's a little bit more work than maybe you need to have it be. But
yeah, although I definitely would not drop a nylon fruit bag into boiling honey, because that just sounds like a recipe
No.
for
You have to wait till it's cooled down. Yeah, you have to cool it down, add some water, but not as much water as you think by recipe that you need. And if you want to, it's really when you want to dial it down. Like, you should be putting in fairly cold water to really bring that temperature down, because that would really hurt you by having scalding hot, hotter than boiling water. Plastic burning hot honey on you.
Oh my
That's
God.
not fun.
Yeah, that's napalm.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's pretty terrible.
Yeah, that would. I can't even. That would make it burn.
I've actually got one recipe that uses pectin instead of gelatin to set. It's for like apple walnut fruit balls, and They're absolutely divine, but the notation I have got in my recipe book is wear a fucking face mask. It got me in the face one time because once it gets to a certain temperature, it starts to splatter and it's horrible.
Yes.
Protective
equipment definitely recommended with dealing with very hot things, especially ones that stick to you and are hotter than boiling water.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
wear gloves and wear
the whole principle behind napalm? It's jelly gasoline, so it sticks to you. So basically, we're talking about jelly and honey here. Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
No. This is more like having somebody. This is more like somebody flinging melted plastic at you, or
exactly.
solder.
Yeah.
Lead solder, something like that. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't. Yeah, that would be bad.
It didn't scar, but I was lucky.
Definitely precautions with making. Boiling honey.
So this is where you get out the chemistry goggles and the face masks and yeah.
Yeah, at least something to protect your eye. That's probably the biggest thing. So like battle scars, I guess. I have plenty of them. Not because I'm smart, but just God, I still have my eyeballs because I wear my glasses a lot.
And making mead without a net, who knew, right? Who knew it was such a dangerous profession?
And here you thought meat explosions were the biggest problem.
I know, right?
One question I have, I've done some, the reading that I've done, one of the reasons that Bochet is on my to-brew list, which is like 3 pages long, and I'm never going to get it done before I die, is that
AJ.
God, yes, it's just getting longer too, is that it causes some of the sugars to become non-fermentable, and I was just wondering because I've always been wrestling myself with having something that's bottle carbonated but still sweet without risking bottle bombs. If a Bochet would be something that would have some residual sweetness that's not fermentable, that would be applicable to bottle carbonating and still having something be a little bit sweet.
That's an interesting question.
Just wanted to bounce it off some other engineers.
Yeah, is Eric? Is Eric on, or did he leave?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I could definitely see it too. I was curious about. I've definitely thought about it because as you say, it's long chain dextrins. That the one time I burned it, I charred it. I pretty much destroyed anything that was fermentable in there. I put normal rehydration of normal pitch rate and put it in there, and absolutely zero things happened with it. And I was like, wow, I took it to the limit. That is way too much burning. And so it certainly will have some portion of it that you'll break it down. That's why it's probably best to do some blending where it'll take some experimentation. I certainly don't have anything off the top of my head where I've done legitimate writing of an experiment and walked through several making of different levels of what it takes in order for that percentage is non-fermentable. But I think you can take a small portion and blend it in with something, and not only will you really cut down on the extremely roasty characters that you'll get, because sometimes it's very charry or just almost carbonized. You're like, I don't know if it's very interesting, but I don't know if I really want to drink a lot of nuanced about it. It's almost like oak. You don't want to drink a peg leg. You want a little bit of oak in there. So I think blending is still art that I have to do a lot of here for a lot of different things. Is trying to find the blending portion, especially when I'm making these one-off recipes. It's like, well, how are we gonna make? What do we want to do with that? Because maybe it didn't work out when I do a 5-gallon batch. Because I moved from 5-gallon, do a couple 5-gallon batches of a thing, and then move on to 100 gallons. And if it gets super exciting, then we contemplate the 500-gallon batch of it. And so far, we haven't done a lot of 500-gallon batches with like the stills. But every time, I'm like, I didn't like something about that. What am I going to tweak, and how am I going to solve that problem? So it becomes kind of interesting in that respect.
Okay. Yeah, for me, the 5-gallon is the big batch. Well, okay, 15-gallon because it's the biggest carboy I own. But the 5-gallon's the big one. The 1-gallon's the bench side.
Yeah, the homebrew level. 15-gallon carboy. Jeez, that's a large one.
Yeah, it's one of the demijohns, and
yeah.
One of the ones, the big thin glass thing in the basket. Someone gave it to me, so I felt I was bound and determined to use it. So it's full of sizer right now, which really needs to be bottled, so I can put last year's sizer in it, which is still in its buckets because I'm a terrible, terrible person.
I had to go get one of the big plastic 15.9s with the big screw-on tops. and the giant airlocks that are like the size of your two fists together. It's the biggest airlock I've ever seen. I was like, wow, what an airlock.